Hey, well, we'll get started. So apparently, Bob has been busy. So, George is going to be talking a little bit about some of the stuff Bob's been working on. And then Norm has been busy as well. These are, I think, just some of your jigs, Norm?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like maybe 5%?
Yeah. Of having a flea market.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is we'll get started with, see what Bob's been up to, and then we'll go right into Norm's presentation. Oh, by the way, did everybody notice that we can now pay for our fees using e-transfers? What a pain in the ass that was.
More of a pain after collecting it.
So sorry to making you twist around to see the slides. This is a follow-up to last month when we talked about Bob Testa's turnings, his beautiful bowls and the platters that he made. And Charles, I guess he's not here, Charles Anderson raised an interesting question. He said, you can't show all this beautiful work and talk about a magic tool that does it. You have to show us the magic tool. So that became the challenge. Don suggested that we get Bob to videotape his use of the tool. And so I emailed Bob, and Bob wrote back, and he said, well, he's got some pictures that he thinks will do it. So I sent them, and yeah, they explain the story well enough.
Can you remind us who Bob is?
Bob Testa, he's the ex-military who always has these amazing turnings, very creative. Does that help any? I'm not very good at describing people.
He's been a member for many years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he can't come to the meetings now, but for health reasons.
Okay. So this is one of his bowls, and this is the bowl that illustrates the use of the tool. So this is the money shot of the bowl, but he sent some pictures of earlier stages of it. And here's the back of the bowl. Now he's got these concentric rings cut into it, but I don't think he used a magic tool for that. I mean, that you can just turn, just make the lathe turn, cut those turnings. But the horizontal cuts, now those are a little tougher to make. So this is an overview of the tool, and it's not really as fancy as we imagined it. Because last time we said, oh yeah, it must be, somehow it's up against the index, and I think it was Brian Green who suggested putting a pin to let it describe an arc so you can swing the router through an arc. Nothing that fancy. It's a lot simpler. So there's, oh yeah, this show up great. So there's a big wide board that's sitting on the rails of the lathe, and then, the big wide board is down here. So a big wide board sitting on the rails, and then this pedestal that brings the router up to the right height. So here's the router along with some of the elaborations that I made. The conversation started 2 or 3 years ago when I talked about a horizontal mortiser that I had made. If you want to see that, I've got it back here. We can talk about it during the break if you like. But it's got these square blocks that hold the router horizontally. And some stuff here in the front that I'll talk about a little bit later. But basically what he can do is move the router horizontally now that he has it up at the level of the axis of the lathe. So that's how he gets all the horizontal cuts. So here's another shot showing the side view, 3/4 view from the back, addressing the turning. And I found out what an index was, or at least I deciphered what indexing means when you have a lathe. These numbers, 14, 36, 48, they refer, I think, to the number of positions around the clock that you can set the lathe at. So with 48, you can have 16 or 24 submultiples of 48. With 36, you can get 9 positions by skipping every 4. So he uses the indexing plus the router to advantage. Here now he's got the horizontal cuts partly made on the upper surface of the brim. So the bottom surface of the brim has the concentric circles, and here he's making the radial cuts on the upper side of the brim.
Is the router fixture itself attached to the top of the pedestal? Is it just sitting
It's
free
just
on it?
sitting loose, he just swings it or
Just goes
slides
by
it.
and moves it?
Yeah. This way. Now here's a detail of the nose of the router. So the special elaboration is here. This cylinder is threaded so that it screws onto the router. So the router itself has a helix. Yeah, it is a helix that goes around, and that lets you adjust it ordinarily in its housing. So take all of that off, and I have internal threads on this cylinder so that it screws on. And then there's a nose that comes off that cylinder. This was fun to make. I made it for my router, making it for Bob's. Bob said, "What kind of router do you have?" And I told him it's a DeWalt trim router. And so he said, "Okay, I'll buy the same one." So that let me design the shroud at home, but for him, who lives actually quite close to here. So I was able to get the thing working. The router itself has all kinds of openings at the front end, and I thought, they don't put openings for no good reason. I better add openings to the shroud as well, I guess for airflow. The flesh-colored, or the pink thing over here is fixed to the main cylinder, but then the purple thing is loose. It can be rotated, and the slot lets you move it out, move it in. So this way, he controls the depth of the cut. He can expose more bit or less bit as needed. This is sort of a micro adjust on the fly. So nothing terrifically fancy, but this is what's working for him. So here's now the bowl in a later stage. And as he's making these cuts, I don't know if you can make it out, but of course the cuts go right off the end. And so they're all on register as far as the outer boundary goes. But they're starting at different levels. I mean, they're kind of jagged and irregular here in the middle. But he's going to fix that because he hasn't made the bowl yet. He's going to hollow out that bowl. And so here it is at a later stage, and now you can see the interior is all nice and even. All the cuts are starting at the same place. So that was the magic tool. Now he's gone on to use it in different ways. Because of that huge platform that he has down at the bottom, he can address the workpiece from all kinds of angles. And so here he's making slots. So this is a walnut blank with a little bit of an imperfection that he filled in with blue epoxy. And so he's making some what look like sort of, you know those hors d'oeuvre, hot dog hors d'oeuvres? Tiny little hollows that look like short cocktail wieners, that's it. So he starts off doing that. This just goes to the vision that this man has. And then he trims them down a little bit here, so he's cut off the top and the bottom of them, so he's getting a dentate kind of profile out of them. And then he masks the whole thing up, and he gets his gold spray paint, and hits it with the gold, and adds some banding, and adds some stain. And look at that, eh? And so that's the blue epoxy in one little corner of the bowl. And then here's the money shot with the imperfection showing the beautiful bowls. And then he also This is how I figured out that 14 was not an angle, it was the number of slices that you had, number of positions. Because I counted them, and yeah, there's 14 of these things. So here they are in rough, and I guess the channels were made using the router. Here they are shaped a little bit, and there it is from an upper view, and here it is with a sidelong view. You know, 40 years ago, I would have called this an ashtray. There you go. So that's Bob's secret sauce.
Wow.
Yeah.
So George, are you taking orders for the modified Panta router?
What I keep neglecting to say this, but if anybody wants anything 3D printed, talk to me. I'll just make whatever you want. If it's a very big thing, then I'll charge you for the filament, but usually the filament amounts to pennies in a shop. Take a look at the thing itself, and you can see if you want it. It's a little bit tedious to work with. It's not like a really easy to use horizontal mortiser. But yeah, no problem. I'd be happy to do it for members of the club.
Great, thanks, sir.
Oh, no worries. So that's it for me. Our feature presentation,
My heavens.
Norman Pirollo.
Isn't that beautiful?
Away you go.
Okay, contrary to popular belief, I don't only work with hand tools. That's what there's a myth going around that everything revolves around hand tools. Yes, but no, but I have all kinds of machinery, and I even have a horizontal mortiser that it was donated to me by, I don't think he's a club member, but he's a woodworker, and I've known him for years, and it was in his family. I think it was his grandfather's from the 1950s or 60s. And it was sitting somewhere, and it's been sitting there for decades, and he didn't know what to do with it, didn't have time for it. So I spent some time restoring it, and I've got a video up on YouTube. It's a beautiful machine, beautiful machine. It's the first time I've ever worked with a horizontal mortiser with a sliding table, X, Y, Z axis, or Z axis. So it's, I work with hand tools, but I work with bandsaws, table saws, everything else. So what I've done is, over the years, I've been indoctrinated into the whole hand tool thing, and some of you probably, we go back to the early 2000s, and I started studying at Rosewood Studio, and it was all hand tool, mostly hand tool, everything revolved around hand tools. So I went back and I had a workbench, and then I picked up two more. Actually, I got two of these, slightly different, two of these Veritas workbenches, and I've working over several years on adapting the workbenches to hand tool use. Now I am left-handed, so some of these are more specific for left-handed use, but some are you can actually, all these jigs are can be plugged in on the opposite side, so they can be used. Their benches are symmetric, and they're really meant to be worked on both sides. And that's what I try to preach to people, actually move them away from a wall. Never have these benches against the wall, because you're shortchanging yourself. You can work, you don't necessarily have to have a second person working. You can actually turn around and have something clamped here, working, and move there, and continue working on the opposite side. So this one has a skirt on the opposite side, I noticed, so I don't have a skirt on my benches. So what I've done is I've developed all these jigs to adapt to make hand tool work, to establish a better workflow with my using my hand planes and everything. And work holding is fairly important. Now you probably, there's a school of thought about hand planing against a stop without clamping it on the opposite end, and that works. But sometimes I prefer to clamp it. Depends on the board. It depends on the arrangement, and depends on what you're doing with the board. If it's fine, if you're removing fine, if you're doing fine work on the board, there isn't much stress involved. But if you're dressing the board or anything like that, you really need to clamp it on both ends. So these are this is an example of the kind of jig I developed with, and the original jigs I had. I didn't bring any in, but the original jigs actually did not. They would plug into the dog holes, so I used the dog holes as much as possible. but they didn't have this part. So it's just playing a game of trying to keep the jig from rotating. I don't have an example, but I had a whole bunch there. It's a lot like this. Like this. Here's a good example. It's not quite that, but so you have to use this as a stop. Put it in the dog hole. There you go. So that would be a stop on different sizes. And the problem with this is it rotates. So I came up with this thing where I'd use both. I'd use the edge of the workbench to my advantage, and this plugs in and keeps it from rotating. So that's the stop, and it doesn't rotate. And then I came up with a clever way to create a tail vise without actually having a tail vise. This was long before Lee Valley developed the, I think I saw an inset tail vise. So it was very difficult to get a tail vise on a workbench. And unless you actually modified your workbench to have a tail vise on there, or built a different model workbench. So I came up with systems to use the face vise. Now this face vise is not quite like my workbench is, but this, maybe Brian, is this a modified bench or something? This vise isn't a standard vise they used to supply.
That's a standard vise.
It
Oh,
is
no,
not?
that's the quick release.
Yeah, so this is
That's not a that's not the vise
not
you
the
have.
standard, yeah, exactly.
The bench I sold you has the old vices
Oh, I
before
got
those
two
came
then now.
out.
I got two then, but yeah, so this fits in here, so I have to put it on the edge. And this, at least on my workbench, now of course, all these jigs are, they're all customized to your workbench, of course. So this doesn't have the stop, this doesn't have the bench dock, and this allows me to slide it along here and use this as a stop on this end. So if I have a board, where's the board here? This isn't much of a board, but there's a board here. This board here, this will clamp.
Norm, you want something bigger?
Oh, yeah, actually, it works better, maybe, sure. It's actually shorter too, so this actually works better. So for example, again, this is not quite my bench. My rods are threaded, the rods are lower, so, but this will clamp there. So this allows me to, it's a quick adjustment, and I've also put a leather face on it for grip. And this allows me to use this as a tail vise. So I use my face vise as a tail vise when I'm planing here. And so that's one of my more successful jigs or appliances or accessories. So again, this can be extended for the length of the board. It locks in, and I've got a whole series of these, and you can use them on either side. So I use these extensively. I use everything you see here. I use all the time, all the time. So I do have a router table. Nothing against routers and router tables, but I try to use it as infrequently as possible now. Like I hardly ever fire it up, and I'll clamp things down and use paw planes or combination planes. And I don't really do too much profile work. Mostly create grooves for drawers and that sort of thing, drawer bottoms. And so there's a whole series of these. This is another version of, this is for the opposite side. This is another version without the dog, and this clamps this leather face. So this, again, this serves as a, this serves as a fits here. And it's not as deep, so this one actually fits in here. So this would be one end holding this, and then bracing it against this side. Now, the beauty of these, they're as thin as I can possibly make them without compromising any strength. Okay, but what you could do is actually raise them if your board's thicker, so you can actually raise it. Well, that's easy to do. Just tighten it up. Or keep it down. Depends on the thickness of the board. This is 3/4 inch. So.
Is that 1/4 MDF?
Yeah, it is. But I've used different materials. This is Baltic birch. You can use Baltic birch just as well, whatever I can add. It's just not.
Curious where you got the 1/4 MDF. I haven't seen it.
Really? Oh, yeah, it's common. Yeah.
So, do you just glue that?
Well, yeah, what I do is I just glue it and I put some dowels in, reinforce it to keep it from snapping or something. And then I flush cut the dowels and maybe sand it a little bit, but not too much. Make sure it's square. That's work holding. Let me see what else here. More work holding. Here's another one. This one probably fits. Yeah, that's another version. Leather fence. Where did I just use that? Another one. So that's the concept. This locks in. Now this, if you're going to do this on your own workbench, first of all, you need to have round dog holes. I'm just kidding. And that's all customized to your offset. This is all, fortunately, we have Veritas benches. It's like, how did this ever work out? And then, so this is offset, and this, I think the holes, where's Brian again? Are they 19 or 20 millimeters? They're just shy.
The workbench?
Yeah,
3/4 of an inch.
they're exactly 3/4, or they're just under?
Probably.
Touch over.
Touch over?
Just a touch.
Touch over, okay. These are well worn. Usually when they're, the workbench is new, they're a little tighter. But. And then we'll move on to, this is something else, showing this too. But this, again, with specifically for the Veritas bench, this is a, what this does is it keeps, for example, if I'm hand planing a wide board and I want it to keep it from shifting, that system I just showed you does work really well. But if you're using any other system, you can use, this plugs in, should plug into it. It plugs in and it keeps the board from rotating that way. And then if you offset it, you have more clearance. You can use an even wider board. So this is about 6-7 inches. So it's just a build-up of just a system where I can just pick these up. I've got a tray. I've got a tray in my workbenches. I've got 2 of these Veritas benches, and I just pick them up. And the secret to these accessories is using them often. When you start using them, the more often you use it, the more likely you're going to pick this up. And I found out with hand tools too. The more often I use a hand tool, the more I familiarize myself with it, the more adept with it. So I'm less likely to turn on a machine like a router. So and I do use a machine still. Next up is that type of work holding is for keeping a board on its face. The next is an edge. Now this specific bench, if you have any edge jointing to do, and if it's short enough, you can of course clamp it in the vise and just edge joint it. But if it's any longer, if it's out here, then you need to support it at the other end. And that was also a dilemma. Because I didn't want to mess with the bench and put a board jack in. I have a third old bench, an earlier Ruble type bench with a sliding board jack. That works really well, but I didn't want to mess with these, so I developed this system of, let's start with this. This is a should fit. Anybody seen this before? It's on my website. This is it's like a board jack. I call it a portable board jack. Okay, now again, it's customized for this Veritas workbench. It's not going to work because of this. Like, this is it's unusual for the bench to have this. I don't know why have they got. Is that the back of the bench? Yeah, that's the back.
It might have been the one from the showroom.
Yeah. So this would actually, it's normally open under here. It should be open on the workbench. And this slides in and it pops in. And then I attach it with 2 hex head bolts. And I've gotten the lowest profile bolts I could find. I forget what they're called, Chicago bolts or something. So that plugs in. And it's portable between my workbenches. But at the same time, I thought I'd be removing it and putting it back in every time I use it, but I find I just leave it on the workbench. So what this does is it just supports the board. flush. Unfortunately, I can't show it, but it's it supports the board at that end, and it's just a conglomeration of some offcuts, Douglas fir, and whatever. I just built it up with some bosses. I think they're called bosses. Some what are these called?
Cylinders?
No, the no, not the cylinder. The
Hex,
threaded.
hex.
It's epoxied in, whatever it is.
Norm's bench should be small. Well,
Okay, sure. They need to be unlocked or something?
Yeah.
This one, top of
Put down the foot.
Yeah. Pull it up.
Yep.
Up, yeah.
That's,
Push it over, drag your end. Just hang on a second.
this one too.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Is that too far, George?
No, it's fine, I'm keeping up with you.
Well, let's see if it fits here. After all that talk about it. So this way, this is how this works.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. No, watch, it works just as well with one bolt. It's pretty strong. So second one, and I have a key here. But you get the concept. So if there's a base plate here, this will support it, and then you
That's terrific.
it moves.
how many woodworkers does it take to There you go.
Are you guys available at my shop?
Yeah, okay.
For a fee.
There you go.
Perfect.
That's what they're
Well, you bring the experts.
So that's an example of how that works, and like I said, it's portable, but only because I have two workbenches. But I find that I just leave it on one workbench and use that workbench for edge joining long work. Again, there's a face vise here, so this can be moved over, and if you put it in the right spot, you can almost handle any length of board, whatever board you're, so I'll leave that.
So the other end of the board would be in the vise, not just
Yes,
supporting the
yeah,
tail
just
end of the
imagine
board,
that.
yeah.
The only
Okay.
reason the
Yeah.
only reason I don't have it here is because of this.
Yeah, exactly.
So how many times do you bang your hip on?
And then and if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
That's okay.
Blood all over it.
Well, that's really,
Yeah, that's like, there's another one, there's another bolt or something. Alright, I'll lose anything. Right there with the keys. And this bolts on. It's incredibly strong, like with these two bolts. So even with one bolt, it's fine.
So the piece just fits on that brass pin.
Which piece?
When you put your board in, it just fits on the brass pin.
It's like a dead end.
Yeah.
And then,
Where'd you get the brass pin? Just out of me?
I think the
Yeah.
benches come with
Yes.
these.
or you can buy them.
I think I mentioned this, but I tend to use wooden ones, and that's the one I use. You can't show.
That's an expensive piece of brass. I got it.
It works too.
Mhm.
But this is shiny. So that's that version. Okay, since we're on that, the portable board jack. So I've gone one step further. I call it a portable board jack, but what bothered me is it works really well. But what bothered me with the design was that you had to unbolt it, shift it over, depending on the length, even though I keep it in one place. So I came up with a different version. This here. This is the next version. This, oh, wow, I can- This is the next version. And this
I wonder
plugs
if
in.
maybe you could vacate that seat, sorry. Thank you.
So the same concept, this plugs in and this moves around. Now you notice it's flexing and all that, but don't forget, the only stress on this is really a vertical stress, not a horizontal stress. And so this works really well too, and it's portable, so I can just pull it out when I'm not using it.
Yeah.
So that's, and all it is this is how it's built. So I've made this as thin as possible. Again, everything I do, whenever I attach two pieces in the workbench series, in the bench accessory series, I always use dowels to reinforce it. And that's probably as much as I can reinforce it without using bolts, and you want to maintain the flushness. So. And it's so thin that I have leather faces on my face vise, and it's exactly the thickness of the leather face, so it comes out in the same plane. It comes out flush. It's the same plane. So that's that version. Another one or something. That's the first version. Like since I've gone up to this version, this is a more rugged version. It's the same concept, but what this does is the actual the hole goes right through. So that's a little stronger. So I can use this to again for edge joining along boards, but I can also clamp. If I remove this, I can also clamp panels. Use it to clamp panels and do some edge work or end work along the panel. So I assume there's a panel here, a large panel. That's what this does. So this concept. That's so I tend to use that more often. The other one now. That's the progression. That's what I love to do is design things. It all comes out to design and keep improving on an existing design. So again, going back to the original board jack, what bothered me is it's really strong. It's probably stronger than these two. But what bothered me was the fact that you had to bolt it, unbolt it, and I had to do something better version of that. Then I came up with a series of these things. This is a bird's mouth accessory. Yeah, bird's mouth accessory, so I can hand plane boards on edge. Orange boards on edge. Again, everything's designed to facilitate hand planing and working with hand tools. Because you can have so much fun with this stuff, and it's just offcuts, really. It's just easy to make. I think these are dangerous. There's a couple of wedges that are larger. So if I had a board, not so much. So that's solid enough for me to hand plane along its edge. Without using a face vise. Are you all familiar with bird's mouth attachments? Yeah, you are. So that should be right in. Put it in and then put the wedges in.
You only tap the wedges in, huh? Sorry, what? You normally tap the wedges in?
Yes. Yeah, because the actual, well, because it's hitting the end here, the actual movement of hand planing. That's that. shows all worked out.
Mhm.
Another adaptation, actually, this works, this should work. Scratch that. You know what I found about these Veritas benches, Brian? They're slightly different. I think Lee Valley sourced different contractors to build them over the
Over
years.
time, probably, Rick would know.
And there's a tolerance, I think some have gone to one.
We've also, we were talking about the dog holes were made slightly bigger, probably by just a couple of thou to allow
Yeah.
for the finish.
I noticed even on mine.
People complaining about the fact that their 3/4 inch brass bench dogs wouldn't fit in the holes.
I noticed
There
even
may
on
be-
mine.
And those benches are old, so there may be some slight variations.
Yeah, they're worn. Now, this is a, this is interesting, if you guys ever, are you familiar with the thicknessing sled?
I'm not.
You're not?
No.
At least one person isn't.
Mhm.
This is a thicknessing sled. Now, this is not my invention or anything, but my version of it. I use this a lot for kumiko, for thicknessing strips down. Kumiko. This is kumiko. You guys familiar with this or seen any of this?
You have seen others, but.
So that's what this does. This, they need to be at the same thickness because they're half flat joints and they all fit together on the grid. So they need to be uniform thickness. So what this allows me to do is the shim. So this is a shim. Build it up. And this allows me, in conjunction with a, now it's really, really customized to the hand plane, the block plane. So in this case, it's, I think the Veritas one's wider. Is that correct? The block plane is a little wider than the Lee
What do you
Nielsen?
got in your hand?
Lee Nielsen.
Very likely, yeah. The standard block plane is wider.
So this slides
The
along.
DX is probably about the same.
So for example, this is a little thicker than going along here. So there's a stop there. So shading something. This brings it, what this does is it brings it down to the, keep going along with the block plane. And it, okay. That's what this does. It works really well.
Just don't change the depth of your blade.
Yeah. No, it's all, it brings it down to, see the tracks. So
Yeah, but if your blade's down a little bit further, you can take it thinner. Shouldn't make that much
No,
difference.
it's a
I don't
shim. There's a
understand how
shim.
it helps you to set the thickness of it.
There's a shim here down.
Yeah.
That brings it down.
So the shim actually is part of how thick that piece is gonna be.
Yes.
If you had a bigger shim, da-da-da-da-da.
A thicker shim
Yeah.
is to make it thinner. So it's,
That's lovely.
so I've
Can you
designed this,
explain how it works? I'm not understanding how it works to get to a certain thickness. How do you
well, the
determine?
plane, in this case, the block plane, there's two tracks here.
It's on
I'll show
tracks.
you.
Yeah, you can't see it.
Can't see the tracks, this one. It's a lot like a shooting board concept, but see the tracks, so it's normally sitting higher, depending on what you've put in there, and then it keeps going down and down to the tracks.
Oh, it
doesn't
runs
go-
on a little
it doesn't go
dado,
below
does
the
it?
track.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right, okay.
So this is customized for this block.
But the question of blade depth, I mean, if your blade is a couple thou farther,
Yeah.
is that not really critical in this case, or?
As long as you're doing it all the same.
Yeah.
So, because,
I suppose it depends on what you're going after. You have to dial it.
You dial it in and you're processing everything with the same block length at the same time.
So do everything in one shot.
And also, the block plane itself, on either side of the blade, there will be you can register the side of the plane as opposed to the blade,
Oh,
Right,
right?
right, but if your blade's extended further, you're gonna end up with a narrower board.
That's correct.
So as long as you, like say, you do all your pieces in one go,
The same one, yeah.
then you're okay.
Yeah.
Which is what I tend to do.
Yeah.
The alternative is to machine that, and that's a real, it really is difficult.
What?
I would,
Yeah, no. You
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
planer? Through a
Yeah.
planer? No, yeah.
no, like, the way I have done it, anyways, there are lots of different ways, but
Yeah.
I get about a 20%, 25% rejection rate when I try and do it using some other method than planing.
What I do is if I'm using when I did use a thickness planer, it was raised to bed.
Yeah,
You can slide something, you can actually slide a board in,
yeah.
a melamine board, clamp it at 2 ends on a table and use that, but that's, make sure it's clamped because if the
Yeah.
teeth grab into that board,
Yeah, yeah. Things are gone.
so I tend not to do it and I do it this way. Now, this is optimized again for kumiko, because what this is the length of this equates to two of these, 2 strips here.
Oh, that's,
So I really only need 3 boards, 3 of these strips, long strips, to create the whole grid.
oh, that's terrific, man.
Yeah, yeah, so it's all optimized. So again, it's optimized for kumiko, but what I was gonna say is I tend to use it for other work now, more, not just kumiko.
So if you wanted to get a different thickness for the outcome, you would have to have a different jig with the
Different-
dado set at a different
different
level,
this.
is that?
Different shim.
So I would label this for kumiko at either 5/32 or 1/8, depends, and then pull this out.
So that's right, that goes underneath it, yeah.
Oh, so you
Goes
put
in,
another
add the
template
actual
in
grid.
that
Okay, yes, I
determines your
see.
depth.
So
I
this
get it,
raises
okay.
the board, so
It
if I had it
raises.
higher, I'd have a thinner board,
Yeah,
and if I made this thinner, I'd have a thicker.
Yeah.
understood.
These are easy to make, I mean, you can make them.
What's the wood you normally use when you go?
Basswood.
That's what-
Basswood, it makes everybody look good, basswood. Basswood makes everybody look good.
It's
Very,
really,
very forgiving.
it's very flexible and it's straight grain. You can't beat it.
And it compresses too.
Yeah.
All this, like for example, if it's a little bit too tight of a half lap, it actually compresses together. Sometimes you don't even have to glue it at all. So, and, okay, so that's,
Oh, that's terrific. That's a great one.
I like that. Nice.
I love that one, Norm.
yeah, yeah. And, what was I gonna say? These are edge dogs. These are,
That's interesting.
not widely used, but I even had to think, like really tax my brain to understand it. So I made them, they're edge dogs, and that's the same concept. You could, so that's, again, uses the, uses your dog hole to advantage, to hold something on the side, so you can use, so if you have a long board, where's that board? It's this here. I don't have a long board, but let's say you can actually bracket it against that. And if you put enough pressure in a leather face, it keeps it from, you see the depth here? This will keep it from swinging down. Just as soon as the long board. So that's, everybody, this is not very common at all. Anybody ever seen one of these?
The dead
I've
man?
never seen that.
Is that supporting like your, like these things? Effectively the same.
It is, but this is more, trust this support more. You're relying on the leather face, and you're relying on the fact that it's, the pressure and it's square. And then it keeps it from, like it's impossible for it to fall off. But I use this in conjunction with this. I can't show this. I'm just gonna have a look at something here. It works here. So what I did is, see what works here. This doesn't look like it has a chain around it. This doesn't have a chain on it? Oh, it doesn't, it's not locked in. Again, it's customized for my workbench, and what this does is it slips into the end of the end vise, and I use this face along with the edge dog. So 2 leather faces to hold the board. Unfortunately, the offset on this is different. So it's not going to work. It just proves that you need to, when you're building these, this is my idea, it's all specific to your workbench. It's, for the most part, not this. This is more versatile. This is another version of, oh, here it is. This is another, something else I've developed to simulate a tail vise, and I use this a lot. It's actually permanently mounted. I've got 2 of these, and I have one on either side. This simulates, it doesn't fit in this one. I don't know why it pulls. So that this drops down, there's a moving part here, and this slides along, so I can use the end vise as a tail vise. And I use that for almost everything now. That doesn't even have the end vise on that. So normally, Brian would be, these holes are larger than these in this case. So it slides along this track with a bolt. This.
That's strong enough to plane against?
Oh, yeah. This, what it does is locks in here, but it doesn't swing because this bolt comes through here. Fits in here. So it slides in, so it keeps it registered at both ends, and it slides along here. And on my benches, this is actually a snug fit. So this is always permanently attached. It's a snug fit. It's a threaded insert, basically. So this fits in here, for example, it slides along, and this keeps it from coming through, and then, oh, the bolt goes through, so the bolt would go through here. So the bolt bottoms out, but assume this is sitting in through the dog hole, this slides along when you're opening and closing this. So it emulates a tail vise.
Norm, I've seen that one in your work before, and I don't understand what it does that a dog hole in the jaw of the twin screw doesn't do.
Oh, it just extends everything out. If you've got the problem with the dog here, the problem I've seen with these dogs here is like, for example, if you need to extend this out, there's very little support here. So what this does is it bridges the end with this, and I can have my work
Okay.
on the
I
surface
got
here.
it. I was thinking about it from a work holding perspective.
Yeah, 'cause I
You're
don't-
thinking about it from a support for the work perspective, and it's a different problem.
Yeah, because
Okay.
if you're hand planing,
I got it.
if you use this dog to support something, that means you're hand planing on an open expanse, and you're actually starting to hand plane from the actual jaw.
Mhm.
So ideally, as is most tail vices, you want to be able to support your work from the
Right.
actual surface. So this extends it out, and it keeps it from,
Got it.
like I can't demonstrate it.
And that's, I haven't spent a lot of time on one of those benches. It's a problem for thin material. It's obviously not an issue with thicker material.
Yeah. And we did a whole series of these, and this is one of the earlier versions. And this was because I have all the holes are doubled up. Ideally, if this was my workbench, this would plug in here and go down with 2 of these, so it supports it. It's a little thinner, and it supports it, and I've created a rabbited ledge to be able to use hand planes. But I don't tend to use that anymore. I just use this. It's simpler, and it works. So it slides along here. So I use the end vise, Brian, I use the end vise as, to adjust it. That would be it for work holding, but I just wanted to demonstrate how, to a little inventiveness and how far you can go with adapting a workbench to hand tool use. And the secret is to just use these as often as possible, and you'll just pick them up and tend to use them more often than not. Next up is a,
Gary says, that's what I guess.
are you all familiar with, where is it? Bench hook. Oh, here it is. Are you all familiar with bench hooks? I'm sure everybody. Okay. This is I did a magazine article for a UK magazine a couple of 3 years ago. And they wanted introductory woodworking, and they wanted me to include a project. So I thought, what better thing to include than a bench hook, and then you can make this and use it for your next projects. So I created this simple to make plans. I had the plans in the article, and bench hook. And the unique thing about this bench hook is, where's that dog hole?
It's over there.
The wood one?
The brass,
Oh,
oh, there's the brass one there.
yeah. I guess I could use that. The unique thing about this is, one of the issues with bench hooks, and I've got quite a few of them now. One of the issues with bench hooks is that they pivot. You know, so you need to really hold it with one hand while you're sawing so it doesn't come back and move forward. So what this does is it locks it in. That's what it does. And then, because bench hooks are typically reversible, the cleat becomes a fence on both sides. It's just the way bench hooks are. So I've actually set it up with two. So that locks it in. But that's something unique that I've never seen before. Maybe you have, but. So that's, I tend to use this, it's on my workbench all the time. I've used 3 or 4 of these at any given time. So I'm gonna move on to, has anybody ever used a dovetail jig for magnet dovetails? There's a dovetail jig, and I've actually, so this would be the pin board. I'm a tails first person, so I would cut the tails and then mark the tails along the pin board, and you really need to orient it correctly. So this is something I've been using for several years. So it's usually sitting here, and what it does, it protects. It's double purpose. Is that the camera here? It protects the workbench. Because all your work, I tend to work right on here. If I'm chopping pins or tails, I'll show you that part. And it also allows me to transfer. This is all spring loaded, so it backs off and it's easily set up. Now there's a saddle. There's a black saddle down here somewhere.
It was
Oh, there it is. And this is how there's some people will, some adaptations of this that I've seen, they're usually a strip here, orient the strip perpendicular to keep the boards aligned, but I find that shortchanges what you could do to versatility, because if you're using a wider board, you're locked into that. So I just do it this way, I just use a saddle edge, what is it called?
Saddle square.
Saddle square. I just use this. What this does is allows me to have them both on the same plane, and allows some squareness. I mean, most of it's square, so I can bring it in. And because this is spring loaded, I could leave this set.
So the springs keep enough tension on
Oh yeah.
so that you can adjust things before you lock it down.
Yeah. The springs actually the pressure to release it, so I'll just release that now. Assuming that. I've also got some sandpaper, some strips of sandpaper along here. They're glued in to keep friction. So let's, for example, if I've got the the tail's done, and I need to transfer the markings here, and I just slip this in. There, see, it's all done. I don't even need to do that now. So just lock this in. Squareness, I mean, most of it's square, so I can bring it in. And because this is spring-loaded, I could, okay, we'll leave this set, and I'll just show
So
you.
the springs keep enough tension on
Oh, yeah,
so that you can adjust things before you lock it down.
yeah. The spring's actually the pressure to release it, so I'll just release that now. Okay, so assuming that. I've also got some strips of sandpaper along here. They're glued in to keep the friction. So let's, for example, if I've got the tails done and I need to transfer the markings here, I just slip this in. There, see, it's all done. I don't even need to do that, no. Wait, so this is what I do, I just lock this in here. And then, because they're spring loaded, I don't need to. And then just transfer the pins over. And this is square, and it's in the same plane, which is important. So that removes all the, any risk, any error. Anybody use anything like this? Or?
That's just for marking, because you don't.
No, it's not just for marking. That's just the first phase. So, for example, if I marked it off and then, so I remove this. So this is marked off. So that's marked. And then if I want to, let's say for example, I don't have a dovetail marker here, but I marked off some dovetails and I need to start chopping them. I just push this back. Now I use a secondary board here, a 1/8 inch board, but you don't need to. And again, you could, I use a metal engineer square, largest one they have, and I square it off. And I put the face against there, for example, and it's nothing. For example, I would have a square here right now, and then, so I'm not working on I'm not chopping against the surface of your workbench, because more than likely you'll damage your workbench at some point in the future. So then I start chopping and then flip it over and chop the rest of the tails.
So you don't saw then? You just use
The sawing is not done here at all. It's done in the face vise. Yeah, sorry, of course the sawing first. Same with this. I only saw diagonally for a while until I hit both. And then the rest is all chopping. So everything you see here I use a lot. It's not like I'm showing something that I don't use. So that's that. Again, I've got sandpaper in there. So where's that?
You could flip that off, flip that into a Moxon vise and then have it higher, eh?
Yeah, I've got a Moxon vise, but I tend not to use it much. I don't know why.
Well, it takes up a lot of room on the bench.
Yeah, I should use it because it raises the work. And all
Yeah.
that.
But you can do it that way. You could just slip the one end down.
There,
That's
even easier,
great.
even easier now. See, I don't have to square it. Make sure to do all your dovetails first. And you don't need to square it. What else? Is there anything else I haven't shown? We can actually go on to the next thing. So I'll put that here. Now, how many of you are familiar with kumiko? You are, aside from you. So the process is, again, introducing another bench accessory. The process involves creating a grid. There's a grid here somewhere. Yeah. Where is it now? Oh, there it is. Creating this grid with, so I demonstrated how to create the right thickness material. Now, interestingly enough, Lee Valley sells
strips. Do they still sell the strips?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, they do. Kumiko strips, I think. They're 5/32. I normally use 1/8 because 1/8 was the ideal gap because it was all done on a table saw. And well, let me try to get the story straight now. Oh, actually, Lee Valley called me in to do a series of 4. You've probably seen it. Series of 4 lectures, demonstrations on kumiko a couple of years back. They're on YouTube. And one of the issues that I had is a lot of people contacted me and they love to be able to do this, but they don't have access to any machines. And so the first machine you would need is something to be able to thickness the strip down to 1/8. Then you need a table saw to create the box joints or the half lap joints. And then you need the big stumbling block was this part. This is the jig to be able to cut the inner components, all the inner components. So you need 2 of these at different angles, 45, 67, 22, and 3 different angles. So that was always an issue. So if somebody wants to embrace kumiko, they need to have those jigs, and they need to have, even if you purchase the wood that's
We do sell the stock.
yeah. Even if you purchase the 5/32 stock from Lee Valley, which is a 1/2 inch wide and 5/32 inch thick, you still need to be able to create these half lap. How else do you do it? So I think the first part of that series of 4 videos I did for Lee Valley, here right will be in one of these. No, it was in a different building. They have a video somewhere else in a different building. It was bothering me that. So here I am talking up to kumiko and everything, but most people can't do it because they don't have the capability to create all this. So I came up with a system to be able to create kumiko with only hand tools. And you've seen it here first. Here it is. This is it. With this jig, I'm able to create exclusively with hand tools. So you need to, one thing you do need is the actual strips. So if you've got these strips from Lee Valley that are pre-dimensioned at 5/32, Lee Valley 5/32, and 5/32 and 1/2 inch wide, which is fairly standard for a kumiko, you would need this bench hook. And what this allows me to do is, this pops off, and there's a reason why it pops off, and I'll show you. So it has 2 faces. One is deeper, and we'll use that later. So at the moment, because we're not using it, it serves as a cleat. So what this does is, sorry, we are going to use it. So I'll pull this off and flip it over. And what this does is I can cut down my pieces to size. Now I've standardized the length of the grid, pieces for the grid to 7 inches. This is 6.5, but I brought it up to 7 inches. And what this, so for example, if you put a stop block here, there's a little block of wood here somewhere. Oh, yeah. Is there a block of wood here somewhere? Oh, here it is. That's the official stop block. Here's a stop block for it. And these things are incredibly handy. So this is the stop block. Here it is. See, it says stop block on it. No, it has to be cherry. It has to be cherry. No, so you would pre-cut. You need 6 for a grid. So you would pre-cut 6 at 7 inch length, which is easy to do, using this. Anybody ever seen these before? Yeah.
You have?
Yep. They're pretty cool.
Can't see them.
What is that you've got there?
It's a little. It's a brass. Just a brass clamp.
Very inexpensive. It's a
Very
clamp.
inexpensive. You can get them here.
It's a clamp. It's the smallest clamp you could use.
It's amazing. Good for small.
So this is how I clamp. For example, I clamp the stop block in. I'm just showing you the whole process of creating the pieces for the grid. Cut them at 7 inches.
using this saw. I need to absolutely use this saw. No, just kidding. So I happen to have marked this off. Is there a ruler here somewhere? Oh, there is. 7 inches. So I marked this off at 7 inches already. Oops. It's a little technique too. Now, once you set up the stop block, sorry, it's just ideal to cut all your strips to 7 inches in that one session. Rock saw. There's another saw here somewhere. Here it is. Again, all these. Chisels in and everything. Again, the way I work with bench hooks is I usually customize them to a specific saw because I want the absolute thinnest curve possible. So this is like almost like a razor saw here. So I use this one. I tend to use this saw. And no, is it going to work? Yes. Okay, so assume you've got 6 of these now, and assume this wasn't there. So the next step is to, so that's done. So we're done with this side. Remove stop block, and now we flip it over. Okay, now this is where this comes in. We'll stop, and there's a reason for that. What that does is, you notice these, see the spacing? The half flap, they're standardized them at 2 3/4. This spacing here, sorry. That ruler. Okay. The spacing here is 2 3/4. 2 3/4. The distance between the half flap joints. So it's important to standardize things, especially when you're creating something like this, because all the notches everything has to match the lengths, and there's a reason why we leave some of the extra material out here supported, and these are cut off afterwards. So where was it? This piece? No. Oh, where's the piece I just cut? Oh, man. Oh, my God. This one, this one. That's not it. No, there it is. Okay, now, so remember I mentioned the half lap joints are 2 3/4, not just, so what I've done is you also create the curves, these curves at 2 3/4 spacing. Okay, now you're probably still wondering how am I going to get a half lap joint out of that. Now these curves only go down halfway. There's a reason for it, because that's actually part of the half lap. So if I'm so I normally, here's starting to explain it. See what this does? So this is optimized for that 7-inch length. And so I would cut a curve here halfway down using this as a stop. I'll show that. Okay, 3 times without any measurements. Then can anybody guess what I'm going to do next? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, use this. This is 5/32. Normally it's an 1/8, but because Lee Valley decided to go with 5/32, this is optimized for 5/32, and this offsets it. So you notice the offset brings it right out. So if I'm cutting, I'll just go ahead and do it. Just pair of these.
So Norm, are you putting your, how are you stopping the blade? Are you putting a stop on the saw blade?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
No, it's that
you'll
little
see
piece
it.
of, little piece of wood
So
right
what
here.
stops you from overcutting?
That thing, the piece of wood.
Goes under the blade.
Goes under the blade.
Okay. But saws cut wood.
Doesn't
matter if you overcut.
Doesn't really matter because it's,
No, Norm, you're doing one
You won't see that.
Mhm.
at a time.
Ah, of course.
I can-
Oh, no, yes, I
you
forgot to
can
mention,
Yeah, you can
gang.
gang.
I ganged them up,
Got it.
I ganged them 3 at a time.
Yeah.
I've never gone past 3, so in 2 fell swoops, 2 series, you can do all the half lap joints. I don't have enough here to do that, but for example, let's say they are ganged up, yeah, of course, that's what I do.
5/16.
Yeah,
So let's,
yeah,
Where would you get saw blade 5/16?
if you,
I don't know why we couldn't put 2 saw blades together.
if you're cheap and you don't wanna do the Lee Valley purchase, you can just run your strips through and use that thin strip jig on your table saw and then.
no, you see, you mentioned the word table saw, this is, it's all oriented towards,
Or you could use that,
You get it,
right?
You get one made?
yes.
Yeah, get one made. Oh, yeah, but he's trying to do it for people who don't have power tools.
So I'm gonna cut this now. I'm gonna cut this now.
The Japanese did it before power tools. Right, so how did the Japanese do it?
And I bring it over here, and I cut this one. Okay.
Yeah, that's all you did.
Yeah, that's slick, I like that. That's really good.
I never went anywhere with this, I should have
Put
pursued
2
it.
blades together. I mean,
I might do some more work on it.
you screw 2 saw blades together, or put spacer.
It's somewhat labor intensive.
Exactly.
It is.
Well, that's the thing with Kumiko, it is labor intensive, but it's
Set
Kumiko,
off
it's
the
supposed to be,
outside.
it's really not production, so.
It's supposed to cause you pain in anguish.
Each saw blade. It'd be perfect.
You'd be surprised, when you start doing this, how quickly,
Once you get it set
once you
up,
get a
it doesn't
system,
take
it's
long.
amazingly fast.
And you're done.
So I got the shim in now, so this has been offset, and this one's already done.
In the afternoon.
So I'm going to do this one. Bring it down. And bring this one down. Now, I'm left-handed, and I normally work at the other end, but because the world is, most of the world is right-handed, I've adapted all my whatever. So that's
You should be over
done.
that, but
What?
you should be over that.
I know. It's crazy. So again, we use that same shim. Oh, it's bottomed out. And these are a little bit tricky to use. Once you- So now to create the actual joint itself, I get a chisel out. No, sorry, wrong chisel. Where's the other chisel? I get this guy out. And I just pop everything off. Now, the beauty of this is, again, using this stop allows me to go just the right depth. There. So, well, that's it. So now if we had 3 of these, there's a three joints.
Would you do all 3 at once with a chisel or singly?
Single. No, you know what, I've done 3, sorry, I've done 3. It's basswood, so it's very forgiving, so that's done by hand now. That's a half lap joint. But then we take this, the same jig, and we do the other, the inner part, all the the angle parts. By the way, the grid's called the jigumi, and the joint system is, I had to mark it because I'll never ever in my life remember this. And the little parts, the little joints is done with these clever little things here. So instead of actually creating this guy, this complicated thing with a threaded insert and that sort of thing, I created this system here with some adhesive backed tape, and that's not it. So here's a piece here. So if I want, this is, so I marked the angles off. There are 3 angles involved in this pattern. It's Asanoa pattern, 67.5, 22.5, and 45. Now the reason for the 22.5 is at this juncture, there's a 45-degree locking piece, and that locks in at 22.5-degree angles right here. So that becomes 45 for this little locking piece. So this again has adhesive back. So if I'm doing a 45-degree angle, it would be this end. It's just after using it for a while, it becomes obvious. So. And that one's already cut. So let me get a piece. That's already been done. Where's that other chisel? You need to use a very white chisel for this. And this is use the bearing. Oh, that's the problem. Forgot about that. That pops off. Yeah, what was rocking?
Yeah, I was wondering.
And this locks it in. It has it's adhesive back, so this locks it in. And don't forget the strips are already pre-cut, so you need to pre-cut to length. And ideally, you pre-cut them all. So that's just getting a little bit too far into kumiko now. I just want to show you how this works. Now what this does is it uses the side of the block as a reference. That's done. So you flip it over. That's 45. 45 on either side. So that's a 45-degree angle. If I flip this around, I get a 67 for some other parts. Now this isn't really a, I don't really want to go too far in kumiko here, but and what this does is, because it's adhesive back, it advances it. It locks into that piece. So I can move it up just enough to get that angle in. That's a 67.5-degree angle for some other parts. So that's beauty of this system is no power tools. So, but you do need this, and you do need these little blocks.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have.
Super. Great.
I better hide this before somebody sees it.
Yes.
So to find a piece of ebony to do that, and I'm not into scarf joining stuff together, so I had done a previous dining room kind of an entranceway table that had a cock bead around the bottom of a hallway table that was maybe 41 inches tall, and I used roasted ash for the bottom, and I put a solution of iron acetate on it, thinking that it would ebonize it. Now I just used industrial strength vinegar with steel wool, and it really didn't work all that well. I wasn't really impressed with it. So in terms of how black it was, it came out kind of darker brown than the roasted ash, but it really wasn't all that great. So I did some investigation on YouTube, and steel wool will dissolve in vinegar, but from my experience, it won't dissolve in industrial vinegar. So I went to Blended Specialty Chemicals over on Ivor Road and bought myself a gallon of 100% glacial acetic acid and mixed up a 40% solution of acetic acid. And steel wool will dissolve overnight in 40% acetic acid. So 10 ounces of glacial acetic acid, 4 ounces of glacial acid, 6 ounces of water, 40% solution by volume, 1.5 pads of steel wool, and it dissolves quickly. The other problem that I've had was I could never get it to be dark enough. So there is a process where you can buy tannic acid powder from a tree called a quebrocro tree. Has anybody heard of that? Anyways, it's available through a place in California called shellac.net. You don't need to dissolve very much of this to get a nice solution of tannic acid. Ferrous oxide is red, ferric oxide is black. And the way it gets from one to the other is you add 2 molecules of hydrogen to it, which is what the acid does. So this stuff, the quebrocro powder, you have to be a little careful using it because it's quite toxic and it's very irritating, so a mask and a face shield. I initially thought, well, I'm going to dissolve it in 100% denatured alcohol so it won't do anything to the grain of the roasted ash, but it didn't work with the dam. It didn't dissolve, it became a sludgy kind of a powder. And when I put it on and then brushed this on afterwards, I got a very kind of a patchy black finish to it. So I was overthinking the whole problem. So I went back and read the directions, which is probably something that none of us do very often. And it said it also dissolves in warm water. So I took a teaspoon of it, dissolved it in 3 ounces of warm water, perfect. Dissolved right away, perfect solution, nothing on the bottom. Spread that on the wood that I was using, and then brush the iron acetate on top of it. And lo and behold, instantly,
That's ash.
it becomes jet black. And it just happens right before your eyes. It's amazing how quickly it turns. Well, that's the issue. The 2 issues that I've discovered is that this powder, it dissolves a little bit on your hands. It also dissolves in tight bond glue. So, which is part of the problem, but it's also part of the blessing, because when you put it together and it dissolves, what the squeeze out is black. So you don't have to remove very much, and it kind of hides whatever little gaps and fills you have. Yeah, you have to dimension the parts before you start. I didn't do it the first time, and I went with a card scraper and tried to kind of get the part, like maybe 1/32. It took the block off. So the second time I did it, I discovered that you dimension the parts first, then you blacken them, then you glue it together and make sure that you get a good glue up. But
does this work without roasted ash? Because you said initially you were using roasted
I
ash.
did use roasted ash for this, but it works with any wood that's got a high tannic.
Okay, so I could use, quote, regular ash and I would get the same result.
Well, the roasted ash is nice because it already starts kind of brown, but yeah, white oak, cherry, mahogany, regular ash would work. But it works.
Try putting a finish on it, or?
Shellac does not dissolve that. I put a top coat of shellac over top of the little shelf that I built, and there's a very slight amount of the black comes off in the shellac, not enough to really make a difference. And now that I got it covered with shellac, I'm just going to cover it with Verathane. So, yeah. So that's what I learned. But it was a fun process.
Should do a write-up on it.
Well, it's just, I took it from a YouTube channel. There's a guy on YouTube that says, how to ebonize wood. You go through it, you take the kumiko powder and you dissolve it. The one thing he didn't do is he tried to do it in industrial strength vinegar. And my experience with industrial strength vinegar, it's about 16%. It does not dissolve steel wool. Yeah, it doesn't dissolve over
So
the dam.
where did you get the acetic acid?
Blended Specialty Chemicals on Ivor Road.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got denatured alcohol.
Oh, okay.
They sell denatured alcohol, they sell everything. The guy's a bit of a grumpy guy, like he's kind of hard to deal with, right? He doesn't want you to just show up and buy stuff, you gotta phone him, or email him and then he'll have it
Show me your
already.
container, what kind of container are you gonna put this stuff in?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
He's a
You
bit
know,
difficult to
it's,
deal with, eh, but
chemical,
anyways.
you gotta watch it.
It worked out well. Anyways, that's all I know about ebonizing.
You can do this.
It was fun.
Feel wool and vinegar.
And do this one.